I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 319. And today in the show, Dan and I are breaking down our 2019 rut hunts, my first success on the back 40, our efforts to better balance hunting and family, and our hard-learned lessons from another rut hunting grind. Okay, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast brought to you by Onyx. This is, for me, the episode where I breathe this big sigh of relief. Like, rutcation has passed. The grind, at least for me, has come to an end. I've slept in an hour or two later than I have been for most of the last 3 weeks. I finally don't feel like a zombie. I imagine you might be in the same place, Dan.
I am exactly the opposite, my friend.
Oh.
Like,
you're waking up earlier?
No, I'm not waking up earlier. I'm just getting more sleep on my rut vacation.
Because of kids.
Kids. Yes. When I was out hunting, I'm spending time at my mom's or at my family home. That's where my camp is, my deer camp is. And so when you go to bed at 9, 10 o'clock, and then you wake up at 4 every morning, you get 7 to 6 hours of continuous sleep. Last night, I went to bed at like 10 and was woken up multiple times and had to wait. It's crazy. But I am now back into zombie mode here at my house.
I guess I'm lucky. My son sleeps right through the night, and so you usually get, he'll usually sleep till 7 in the morning. He'll go down at like 8, sleep till 7. So.
Don't ever say that to me within striking distance because I'll probably punch you right in your mouth. I hate it when other parents are like, "Oh, what? Your kids don't sleep through the night and mine does."
It sounds like a parenting issue, though. It's got to be it, Dan.
I wouldn't doubt it.
So I will avoid making that comment anymore. But the game plan for today, other than making you feel really bad about not getting sleep, is talking about what we've just been doing over the last 2 or 3 weeks, because we haven't gotten to check in since that whole rut period began. So I wanted to walk through, our rut, talk through what went right, what went wrong, what we learned from it, tell the stories of the exciting moments that you and I had. It's always fun for me to kind of do this debrief, to take some time to really kind of try to chew or process what happened. Because at least for me, the rut is this, like, I don't know, it's a marathon, but it's like 1,000,000 miles a minute. It's go, 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 go. I always need something like this where I can sit back, think it through, digest it, and even appreciate it a little bit. Sometimes just having a conversation like this helps me appreciate what just happened. So that's what I'm thinking if you're up for it.
I'm down, dude.
So on a 1 to 10 scale, how would you rate your 2019 rutcation?
Dude, I'm telling you this right now. I had so much fun. It should be illegal. Like, I had such an absolute blast.
Are you sure your wife's not listening to this? I don't want you to get in trouble.
No, we already had the argument about it. So
what was the argument?
Oh, just like, well, I hope you had fun, but I was here with the kids and blah, 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 blah. I'm just like, hey, whatever. Like, you just, at some point you just stop listening to them and you just say, hey, this is what I'm going to do.
So yeah, you got to come back from the trip. You just got to
Right.
come back from the trip like, oh, it was horrible, honey. It was really awful. I'm so glad to be home.
I can't do that though. I can't do that because I walk into the house and I'm like, hey, everybody, how's it going? I'm refreshed. I'm back being happy dad. Let's do this. Let's be a parent. Let's go play. Let's color and all this. And then here she is, while we were on the rut or while I was hunting, she got sick. So she got like a sore throat and just felt really crappy and all this stuff. And here I am, it's like, I'm out shivering my balls off, but I'm doing it with a big smile on my face,
Mm-hmm.
So man,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's a tricky one. We'll have to talk about that a little bit more later too, because I definitely had some of that same balance issue that I had to think about too. But sorry, you were talking about how awesome it was and you were having the time of your life.
Dude, I needed a rut like this though, because the last 3 years I went into, I felt like I got off easy. The stars kind of aligned the last 3 years where 2016, I hunted one day and then a huge like 24 to 48 hour rainstorm came through. I'm like, aha, I know what I need to do. I got some trail camera intel. I'm going to pop into this fence row. I'm going to climb up. I saw a buck stand out of his bed, grunted, buck came in, shot him. Right? That was 2016. 2017, went into a new farm that I had hunted one or two times in early October. Went into a run and gun. Wanted to set up in this terrain feature that was leading to a really big CRP field. As I'm walking in, I see a ton of scrapes set up inside the timber, outside of this bedding area. Deer walks through. He's out of range. One grunt. Bap, he turns around, comes in. I shoot him. 2018, set up in another terrain feature inside of basically this pinch point / corridor behind a standing cornfield, not on the food edge or not on the field edge. It rained all day, waited for the rain to stop. The second the last raindrop hit the ground, I was already in the tree. Buck comes out, shoot him 3 years in a row, right? Pretty much just, I think 3 days. 3 days was the longest, right?
You make it sound really easy in Iowa, man.
Well, no, what I'm getting at is, it's not easy, right? I mean, it's not like I just walked into a fresh property and killed these deer. This is 7, 8, 9 years of knowing this property, knowing where the terrain features are, scouting all this stuff, and putting myself in the best possible position. This year was a little bit different. Not only was I going into a rut where I had my mind set on just a handful of deer or a certain caliber of deer, I also was fighting things like, I would say within a half a mile of this farm, there was close to 1,000 acres of standing corn, right? And close to 500 acres of it were bordering the farm that I hunt. So it was just, I knew I had some obstacles in front of me, but I knew I also needed to fall into the routine like I always do and just get at it. It just took longer this year, but that's what I needed. I didn't want really an easy season. I wanted, because there's something happens to me anyway, when you go and you hunt that first week, right? And you're just like, I'm having fun. I'm seeing some deer, not really what I want, but I'm seeing them. And then there's a moment where the grind kicks in. And then some people bitch and complain about it. But for me, I really like to embrace it because I love it. I love that point where you're just, you know, the first week you don't want to sleep in, you're happy. The second week you're like, oh man, I would really love 15 more minutes. Or it's the one day it was -10 with wind chill, and I'm walking in and I know I got to, climb up in this stand and sit there an hour before the sun comes up, and I'm freezing my balls off, but I loved it. You know what I mean? Like, you can bitch and complain, or you can embrace it. And I did a little bitching, but I also embraced it. And that's when you start to really, for me, I really enjoyed myself. So if I would have tagged out in the first week of this season, it would have just been, oh, I had fun. But I hit that grind point. I hit that, the point where you start to feel, I don't know, there's something different about me when I get to that point, and I just am able to enjoy everything that much more. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, I can't claim to ever really understand you, Dan, but I can say that I get what you're saying in this case. And for me, I definitely appreciate an end result much more when there had to be struggle to lead up to it. And so I've always said, I don't want to have that hunt where I kill a buck on the first day. Of course, if it happens, that's great. But my favorite hunts are the ones where you struggle for 7 days or something like that, and you think it's not going to happen, and you've almost lost hope, and then boom, it comes through. Or you had to hike, and you were miserable and tired, and the grind was wearing you down, and then it finally pays off. That is the payoff that's always the most meaningful. So yeah.
Did you get that point this year?
Yes. In a different kind of way. I mean, absolutely. I definitely hit the grind, and definitely was wearing and dogging down, because my marathon started early this year, because it was basically from October 13th on. I think from October 13th until November 15th, I hunted all but 4 days, I think. Because I did that mentor hunt for a weekend, and then I was home for a day, and then I left for the 7 days of hunting in the boundary waters, and then I immediately started hunting for Tran for 3 days, and then I immediately started filming an episode of the Back 40 for 3 days, and then I got back and immediately started hunting in that late October time period for Tran again, and then went straight back to the Back 40 for a week, and then straight back for Tran. And so I didn't stop. I mean, I took just a couple days in between that whole, basically a month-long period. I hunted, I think, 25 or 26 days. So,
yeah. So you weren't just the hunter too. You also had to play guide for a little bit throughout that time frame.
Yeah. So there was 2 days of me guiding a new hunter on that mentored hunt, Field to Fork event, and then hunted myself in Minnesota, and then hunted for a few days, and then on the Back 40, I hunted with Doug Duran, and I hunted those days, but also was helping him get set up and giving him a tour of the place and doing things like that. And we hunted together one day, and then hunted it again on my own for a while. And then later in the Back 40, I took my dad out. We'll talk about this in some more detail later, but I kind of guided my dad for a few days hunting and just sat with him, and tried to get him a buck too. So that was really cool. But yes, so it was kind of a mixture of me hunting and me taking other folks around, me showing other folks around, which was fun for a change, but it definitely added up to a lot of days in the field, which is great. I can't complain about it, but I mean, if we're being honest, it does wear you down too. So by the time the 14th, the evening of the 14th came, and I was ready to sleep in and just kind of recenter myself, which is what I was able to do this past weekend. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So there's a lot to cover though in between all that we just talked about.
Yeah. I hit that point where it was like, oh man, I've been at it a while. And I did take some time to go back home for, a more afternoon and a morning hunt, just to kind of help the wife out, because she had some plans. But I started hitting that point within the grind where it's just like, man, dude, I'm a dad and a husband too. I got things I probably should be doing. You start to second guess where you actually need to be. Is that in the tree stand?
Yeah.
Or is that back at home? So
Yeah, I'm definitely starting to get that more. There's definitely a change happening for me with the family and everything. And, we've got a toddler now. He's almost 2, and my wife's pregnant with our second. And so, yes, that's absolutely coming up. And And I did take a couple days off that I normally wouldn't have, that I'm so glad I did. And that's kind of changing my thoughts on the rut marathon for me a little bit. I think in the future, I will probably do that. In the past, it was like, you have to hunt every single day. This is it. You got to make hay when the sun shines. Go, 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 go. Don't be weak. Be strong. Go, 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 go. This year, two things happened. Number one, I realized what you just said. There are some things more important than killing a deer, and I need to try to do a better job of fulfilling those obligations too. So taking some time off. Another thing I did different this year, when I was hunting my closer to home spot, I didn't hunt all day on most of those hunts. Some of them I did, but I realized that I could come in and help out with my son a little bit and give my wife a little break. And I decided, you know what? Yeah, the midday hunt can be good. I've had some encounters. I like to do it because it's, I like to always be able to check that box, which says I did everything I possibly could.
Right.
But this year I realized sometimes you got to make sure your priorities are right. So I came in midday and helped out more. I took a few days off in the middle to help out. And I think that moving forward, I'm going to continue to do that and maybe do it a little more. Because you always say it, and I've always given you a hard time about it, but this is a selfish thing we do, and I think there's an interesting balance you have to find as a dad between giving it your all. If this is something that matters to you, you want to give it your all and work hard, but at the same time, balancing it with your family. And so that was something for me. And I will tell you though that taking that break, I took a couple days, one weekend off, and stayed home with the family. That little break was a huge help with the grind. Like giving myself a little break also revitalized me and maybe made me a more effective hunter over the final 5-6 days because I wasn't so tired. So there might be something to, saying, all right, it's okay to sleep in today, because if you sleep in that one day, maybe it gives you that boost that gets you that much more confident, that much stronger, that much more focused for the rest of your trip. I don't know. That's something I've started to think more and more about. I was usually like hunt all 14 days nonstop. Maybe I'm just getting old, or maybe I'm getting smarter or something. I'm not sure, but there might be something to keeping your edge, being more important than just being there every spare second. I don't know. Maybe you could make the other way too, but these are things I've been thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, it's just what part of life you're in, right? Like for me, I got 3 kids and I got a wife, and their life doesn't stop when I go and when I go away. So I did the same thing. I took a afternoon and a morning off, and during the snowstorm that happened, came back up here, let my wife go and do the event that she needed to go do. Next morning, got the kids ready for school, took the wife and the youngest son out for dinner or out for breakfast. And then I came back and started up again. And I think not only did she appreciate it, but you start talking about checking boxes. I feel like I felt good then going back and saying, I checked a box. I showed her that she and the family are more important than hunting at that time right there. Right. And now I can go back and I feel confident that she's not going to be near as upset with me when, for week number 2, going into week number 2. And I don't know, I felt good about myself at that point. Yeah.
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a new phase in life for us. I'm a little bit behind you, but getting there and starting to understand where you're coming from more and more often. And it's a transition. It's something different. It's a whole new wrench that's thrown into rut plans and rut strategies and all of that, but it's for the best possible reason, right? I mean, I wouldn't like to have my rut hunt screwed up for anything more than for getting to see my family. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's a pretty good reason to change the plans. But let's start back at the beginning. Let's break down how the hunts actually went, because you and I both found some success, but we both had some struggles along the way. Let's talk through the highlights of your rutcation first, maybe, and break down some things you figured out along the way that you learned, some things that led to your success and all that.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. remember me talking to you this summer and earlier in the fall where I was like, man, I'm not even going to start hunting until week number 2 of November.
You did say that, didn't you? Because of that buck, right?
Yep, because of that buck.
Yeah.
Well, all that went out the window, right? It's November 1st, the evening of November 1st. I woke up, here at home, got ready, left. November 1st was day 1 of my rut vacation. And if anything, this year solidified that next year, and I know there's a whole bunch of different variables that go into this decision, but next year, I know for a fact that as hard as it's going to be, I need to stay out of the woods like November 1st through the 4th. And just, I would rather have those 4 days on the back end to try to catch one of these giant zombies that are walking through the timber, not even paying attention, than have a fresh, just watch a 2-year-old parade, basically like what I did this year.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I really do think that next year, it's probably not even going to start for me until my birthday, November 5th, and grind it out until Thanksgiving. Yeah. And go put the time on the back end of the rut instead of the front end.
It's an interesting situation you guys have there in Iowa because you don't have a gun season that opens until December. So you get to hunt that whole rut. Yep. I've always been really jealous of that because here it ends September 14th for us. Gun season opens the 15th, and then you can of course hunt through that, but it's it's totally different. The normal deer behavior ends on the 15th. Then it just becomes deer reacting to 700,000 hunters or whatever it is. So I've never got to experience that period of the year hunting here in Michigan like you have. And I've heard, and I've hunted in Ohio a little bit during that time period and seen that it can be pretty darn good. So it makes sense from that perspective, what you're saying.
Yeah. But it was cool to go see, to just have encounters, because the very first evening I had a perfect wind to go into the best possible, what I'm going to call, 1A, 1B. It's the 1A bedding area. It's one of the best bedding areas on the properties that I hunt. And I got what you would call kind of downwind of it. And just wanted to see what was working in it. It's this giant rectangle that sits on a top of a ridge with a couple of other smaller ridges leading up to it. Right. And that's where I wanted to start off. And instantly I got in that night. And I just want to reiterate how important and how much focus I put on exit and entry strategy. Access was so key to the encounters that I had this year and the success that I had this year. Having to go out of your way, taking your time, really thinking through, kind of led me to put my stands in the right spot, because I had, I paid attention to the access. If you got to go take that extra step and go around or J-hook in or walk through some nasty creek bottom or whatever just to get to these spots, I think that is one of the key factors into the success that I've had in the last 4 years, is just access and not just blowing through the timber and taking the long way if needed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So how did you access this bedding area?
Yeah. So this is kind of foreshadowing too, because eventually it's the tree that I shot the deer out of this year.
Nice.
And so I park in this little grass field. I'll walk a fence line in, drop down to the lowest point, basically a drainage between 2 ridges, and I walk that drainage in and then take a hard 90-degree, basically left up, and walk straight to my tree stand. And it's a southwest wind, so my wind is kind of blowing down into the drainage. And I have this, I don't know if you followed my Instagram story, but
I did.
The title of that stand was kind of like risk versus reward. Mm-hmm. And as my scent would drop down into the lower spot of this drainage, the deer would kind of work that top third of the ridge and come into this bedding area from both sides. So I was hunting the I guess the north side of it, the top side of this bedding area. And what's cool about this bedding area, it's this giant rectangle, right? So I want you to take that rectangle and I want you to chop it into 3 equal pieces.
Okay.
The centerpiece of this bedding area is almost hollow. There's 2 big oak trees that canopy out, so there's not a lot of growth on the forest floor there. So it opens up, and it becomes this staging area for the deer before they work their way through the bottom part of the bedding area and head to out for the night. They go to a ag field. And once I found this spot, I was just like, oh my God, now it's just a waiting game, right? The deer are there. And the first night that I set up in this tree, I saw 7 bucks ranging from 1 year old to possibly a 4-year-old. It was hard for me to tell, but he was a big 9-pointer. And there was, a handful of does in there. And the first night is just a bunch of 2 and 3-year-olds snort wheezing at each other. It was awesome way to kick off the rut. And the deer would just work through, they'd work through the area. They'd go to that staging area. They'd mill around a little bit, leave some scent, they'd do some scrapes, scent check these does, posture up on each other. And then as the evening starts to fade away, they work their way out, which was awesome because then I didn't have to worry about staying in the tree stand longer because these deer were, sticking around. Right. And that's why I love hunting staging areas, because if you're hunting a field edge at dark, as you're getting down out of the tree, here come the deer. Mm-hmm. Right. I'm off the field edge into this, through a bedding area already into this staging area, like this staging area within a bedding area. And the deer are working their way. So all I have to do is drop down out of my tree, go back to the bottom that I walked in, walk the bottom all the way out to my truck. And it's just the perfect access and entry and exit. You know what I mean? So that tree stand stayed there because I had to take the sticks down, but that tree stand stayed there because I was like, this is money. If they come through, it's kind of fun. It kind of pinches in tight where this opening is under this big canopy of this oak. And my shot is going to range anywhere from 15 to 32 yards. And that's where I was like, okay, perfect. And I hunted the backside of that, a different angle on a different wind of that bedding area, and saw some good activity too, but not as good as that particular spot. So, and then from there, that first night was awesome. And I had really high expectations going into that, the rest of the week. But what happened is then you realize how much of a factor that standing grain played on the rest of it. And it just became does and 2-year-olds. I mean, that's all I saw I had a couple encounters with some 3-year-olds that I decided I didn't want to pass, or that I did want to pass because I had a long time to, oh my God, there's a big buck. Okay, cool. What is he? Do I know him? Do I recognize him? What is he doing? Okay, man, he looks good. Okay, it looks like a 3-year-old. His legs are long. Legs look long. I had the opportunity to really observe some of these deer through the binos, and then when they did work their way through, I was like, okay, well, I don't, you know how we talk about it. He didn't make me go, whoa,
yeah,
you know what I mean. Yeah. So, other than that, there was hardly any sign on the property. I mean, I didn't run into hardly any scrapes at all on this property. I mean, I did, but not like previous years, man. On the bottom, this was a corn year on the farm. And on the farm, the corn was gone. They combined it. And I saw a ton of deer in the picked cornfields, but I'll tell you this, there was hardly any sign along the field edges this year, which blew my mind. So another kind of, man, what is going on? And I think a lot of it had to do with the deer were in the corn a lot.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver, off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co, and make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Yeah, I got to believe a lot of people had similar experiences with that standing corn. I mean, we had the same issue here, still have it. So much moisture, so wet, so much rain that kept farmers from able to get that corn out. I still have standing corn all around most of my spots right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, based off of people responding to my Instagram story, you nailed it. They, especially here in Iowa, and I think at one point they said only 43% of the crops were out, or the corn was out in the state.
And when was that?
And I think that was last week.
Okay. Wow.
Early last week. So I'm sure some more's come out since then, but I mean, it can really affect, and I'm talking about guys from Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, and northern Missouri, saying this, and that's for the most part similar terrain throughout all that. So a lot of people were fighting standing crops, and other than that, I started my routine, right? I had a truck full of tree stands. And so when I was doing my run and guns, I would throw a tree stand up in what I thought was a really good area, really good access, really good stand location. And then I would leave it up, tear down the sticks, and move to the next spot, right? And really try to hone in on where the majority of the deer were moving. And most of it was up high where my shooters, my quote unquote hit listers, had been historically moving last year. Right. And so I go through this routine of checking trail cameras, and there is nothing on trail cameras. Right. And I hate to put a lot of weight on trail camera data, but historically, if I'm catching, I got some decent pinch points on the farm. So if they're not on one of these trail cameras throughout a 4 or 5 day period, they're not on the farm right now. That's just how I feel. Right. And so it just wasn't. So I decided I need to give this part of the farm a break. This was like 3 or 4 days into it, 5 days into it. And then I decided to go down to a different part of the property just to see what was moving. And it was another one of the best bedding areas on the farm. And just sat up it's a creek crossing, but I can see a long ways on both sides. It's not a field edge set, but it's like a staging area on top of a bedding area that I can see into one of the bedding areas. And sure enough, this is where all the deer were at. They're all in the picked corn. This is where I passed 2 3-year-olds. This is where I passed a really small antlered 4-year-old. This is where I saw the first shooter of the year, but he was like, I don't know, 1,000 yards out, and I only saw him through binos. And so I just, decided I needed to give that a shot before I counted everything else. Cause you got to know on the properties that you're hunting, you got to kind of know what's going on everything. Right. But I realized that the caliber of the deer were not really what I wanted. So I had to then focus back on. So basically I hunted off of the east side of the farm, threw some attention on the south side of the farm, a morning, an afternoon, another afternoon, just to see what the deer movement was doing. A lot of does, but also a lot of 2-year-olds and a couple 3-year-olds. Saw one 4-year-old out in the distance, not necessarily the caliber that I was looking for. And then I knew, okay, I'm doing the right thing by staying on the east side of the farm, because the caliber of the deer that I want to go after are not on the west side of the farm either. So then it just kind of became, it's time to just wait them out, right? You've kind of gone through your stand rotation. You've looked for that deer movement. You've got your stands in the best location. And then now I can chop my farm in half and go into the east side of the farm and only really pay attention. So now basically what I've done is just cut the acreage in half almost.
And hold on, I want to make sure I got this right. The side that you decided to focus on was the side where the picked cornfields was nearest to, or the side where the standing corn was?
The side with the standing corn.
Okay.
Right.
So why do you think that most of the deer activity was over by the picked corn, but you were seeing the mature bucks on the standing corn? Because that was just better cover over there. They felt more comfortable on that, in that area.
So I had, at this point, I had yet to see any mature bucks on the standing corn side, but the caliber of the deer that I saw on the picked corn side were not what I was going at, even though they were a 4-year-old. Like I passed this one 4-year-old and I think he was like 125, 130. And he had a really huge body, but just not really what I was, he didn't make me go,
yeah. Right.
So it all kind of leads into this one moment where I'm like, all right, I need to, so I go through this 6 days, and this is all kind of happen. I'm telling this story and I'm not going through it day by day, because there are days where there are mornings where I'm not seeing any deer, or there's an afternoon where I'm sitting and I didn't see a deer. Maybe I saw a spike come through or a 2-year-old come through, but I'm starting to hone in on the deer movement on the where my hit listers have been historically. Right. And I set up on I'm like, okay, I need an observation sit tonight. We got some fresh, we got some snow coming in tonight. And I'm going to get a tree stand in here, because historically the snow comes, knocks a ton of leaves off. And if there's snow on the ground, you can see forever in the timber, right? Movement is really easy to spot out when you have a brown dot walking across a white background.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So I set up a stand that evening. I am, watching, a couple 2-year-olds chase a couple young does around. Probably weren't hot. Still seeing doe groups, maybe 1 or 2 individual, standalone does. Go back home, turn around, and this is the coldest morning of everything. And I walk into the tree stand. It's already set up, and I'm literally, I get there an hour before daylight. I'm bundled up with all of my gear. I was wearing everything, and it's so cold that I pull my stocking cap over my face, and I'm not even looking at this point. The sun's
just surviving.
The sun's just coming up, and I peek out every once in a while. I'm looking around, and I started to shiver. So I'm like, this is typically what happens in other years, where if I rattle, I'll warm up a little bit. So I did this. So I did this blind rattling sequence just to kind of warm up, get the blood moving again. stood up, cracked the antlers together, and this like 2-year-old 120 class comes in, and he just kind of mills around a little bit and hangs out, and then he works his way up the ridge. And here's the cool part. For every time that me and you talk about how deer use terrain, we talk about how deer, use the wind to their advantage and all this stuff. For every time that we say that, I can show you an example like this and an example like what I'm about to say of deer having the wind to their back.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So yes, it's good to know that, hey, deer like to quarter into the wind, or they walk the top third of a ridge, or they do all these different things. And that's a good start.
It's a tendency.
It's a tendency, right?
Not a rule.
Right, exactly. And the deer were working these ridges with the wind to their back. So as they're going up, they're relying on their eyes to see what's in front of them. But so I'm sitting on a north facing ridge at this point with a north wind. So I'm looking at my topo map right here, and it's blowing into a drainage. Right. So at some point, this deer is going to cross my scent stream, but it's going to be so far down that, hopefully, with help from the ozonics and with help from him just being a long ways away, if he does catch my scent, he's not going to go bananas. He's just going to, trot off or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the reason I sat in this particular ridge was they logged the tops. That has been a couple years ago, 3 years ago, I think it was. And now we have this growth in here. It's about head high, 6 foot high of just thorns. And what it's done is it's created edge, this giant edge on the top of this ridge. And the deer all stay down because they don't want to walk on the top and they don't want to walk through this thickness. It's created this edge where it's almost just like a hallway that they walk through. And that's what this 2-year-old did. And that's what I'm hoping that as they're coming out of the north side to check this south side of the farm where all the standing corn's at, I'm hoping that they use this ridge and this travel system. Well, and you've been on the farm before, and it's just a bunch of ridges.
Yeah, big timber and big ridges.
Big timber, yep. And so I'm hoping that this is where a majority of the movement has gone, has been over the years, and this year I'm going to sit on this ridge. So I'm bundled up. That deer works by, and all of a sudden I hear something raking a tree, like not a squirrel jumping around. And it's about 7:30 in the morning. Sun's coming up, it's shining right. It's bright day, one of those no cloud mornings. And I hear raking. And I stand up and I make my way around and put the binos up. And there's Gnarly Charlie on the second ridge. And I got about a 30-second look at him before he started walking up the ridge towards the standing cornfield. And this is a morning hunt, right? So you're thinking that maybe, and my thought was that hopefully I'm going to catch these deer coming out of the cornfield down back to a bedding area.
Right.
And that's why I'm hunting the north wind. So they're going to come at a different angle and still have the wind to their advantage, but they're coming the opposite way. All the deer were coming from the north to the south on a morning hunt, and Gnarly Charlie's working his way up the next ridge to me. And he's working his way, working his way up this ridge, which is, he's walking south with a north wind, and I got binos on him. So I'm like, okay, that puts a dot on a map. That's a physical location. Now I can't go in there.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Before you go any further, you need to tell me about this moment, because you've been talking about Gnarly Charlie for 2 years now. You've been looking at these pictures of this pretty darn cool deer.
Yeah.
You talked about this year, even last year for a moment, you said it might be this kind of year. And then this year you said, it's going to be hard to, maybe I'm going to have a year where I really chase this one buck, to a degree at least. Now you finally see him in person.
Yeah.
That's the first time you've seen him in person, right?
Yep. First time I've ever seen that deer. And
what was that like?
It was, I'll be honest, I was so cold that my brain wasn't thinking like, yippee, I got him. My brain was just like strategy mode, right? I think I texted you and I said I saw him, right?
Yeah.
And I think
I was more excited than you were then, maybe, because I was 17 exclamation points. Yes.
Yeah, dude, it was fun. I mean, it was awesome seeing a deer of that caliber. And of course, I couldn't rattle at him or I couldn't call to him because he was downwind of me.
Yeah.
If I would have done that, he would have came all the way around, he would have had to come all the way around and eventually would have crossed through my scent stream. And I didn't want to risk it. I didn't want to risk blowing him out of the farm.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I watch him disappear and I stand there for another 45 minutes, basically just eagle-eyeing my ridge, hoping he circles around the drainage and comes back down, maybe just on a cruise, or to see if he pops up on the third ridge over. And I'm just trying to observe everything to see if he's kicking a doe up, if he's following a doe, whatever. But it looked like he was alone, right? So my mind goes to strategy mode. And now I'm thinking, I'm looking on my phone. I'm looking at Onyx about, okay, where can I sit? Every little ridge top or spur ridge in this area is now getting basically a test run on it. Okay, this afternoon's wind is going to be here. Tomorrow's wind is going to be here. And so what I did, just like I did last year, I was like, okay, I found his shed here. I had a sighting of him here. I got trail camera pictures of him here. And I basically drew a line between where the last trail camera pictures that I've had of him, which was October 31st in the middle of the night, and to where he was, and looked at these the travel patterns between there. And instead of deciding, hey, I want to hunt right here where he's at currently, I kind of thought I'm going to loop all the way around and I'm going to hunt now the south facing ridge in hopes that I'll see him on the north side again, and not necessarily, potentially I could kill him in a spot like this, but I just want to get a secondary sighting of him and know where these other little travel corridors are, and in having this, what am I trying to say here? Where my buck was traveling last year.
So you're kind of predict where he was going to be.
Exactly. Trying to, right. And as we all know, that doesn't work. So, every time. So I'm just trying to think of where this is moving. Cause, there's another little farm on top of this ridge, in between these standing cornfields. And I thought to myself, man, I don't think he's going to go out there in the morning in broad daylight and expose himself. Right. I think he's just going to hug these ridges on the edge of the timber where it meets the standing corn in this ag fields. And he's just going to cruise around looking for a doe to come back to go or come back or whatever. So I stayed in there for quite a while. And then finally I got down, went back to my truck, went back home and just studied the area. And then basically the next, that afternoon, I dropped down in on the opposite side of the ridge further east on a really main travel corridor, hoping to get him, get a sighting of him or have him work where all these does were coming through on a different set that I saw, 3 days previous, right? I didn't see him, but all these does were working through, and I said, okay, I'm going to get in shooting lane with all these shooting range of where all these does are at. And basically I dropped down off the south facing ridge and caught them coming out of the cornfield, working their way through. Well, that worked. A whole bunch of does came through, a couple bucks came through that night, going to food. And then the next morning I hunted that again, and they were coming away from food, and no other sightings. So that time of year, anything could happen, right? Mm-hmm. he could hook up with a doe. He just was cruising in that area, and he decided to go, he zigged when I zagged, and now it just becomes, hunt that location again. Well, now we're going back to that bedding area that we discussed earlier where I left the tree stand at, right?
Bedding area 1A.
1A, right. Bedding area 1A. So now I'm just like, okay, I saw him. Now I can even chop more area off this farm because historically he doesn't go through the main pinch on the farm. So now I'm just chopping 100 more acres off the farm. And I'm like, okay, now I can really focus on this. I want to say 120 acres and really focus on it. Check trail cameras, I brought more trail cameras in, and hopefully get to a point where I'm just, Bill Winke talks about casting a net with trail cameras, and then bringing all these other trail cameras in and basically just tightening down on this buck's area. And hopefully you start, even though it's the rut, you can still see a pattern of where these deer are moving. And that's kind of what I was hoping to do.
And I know we've talked about this in the past, but studies have shown that is true, that typically these bucks will have a handful of hot spots, usually doe bedding areas or doe feeding areas, that they will kind of rotate through as they're checking for hot does during the rut. So it might not be as clear as a early season bed to feeding pattern where they're going from A to B, but during the rut, they do kind of circle, sometimes in varying ways, but they'll go to A to B to C to D to E, then from A to B to C to D to E, and they'll kind of slowly work in that kind of way. At least I've come to see that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They go through this, it's almost like they're doing the same thing that I'm doing. Except their locations are the bedding areas within, or the doe groups within this range.
Yeah.
So they're walking in a big circle basically until they find a doe, and they decide to chase the doe, breed her, come off her, and then go back into that rotation again until they find the next one. And that's what I was hoping that he was going to start to do. Because last year I got him on a handful of trail cameras in somewhat of a circle. Right. He hits a trail camera, and then a couple of days later he hits another one. And then maybe a day later he hits another one. It's all within there. And so that was that triangle that I talked about. Right.
Yep.
Remember I said I had this triangle that I feel if I'm going to kill him, he's going to be within there. And I'm in this triangle. Right. And so I just really wanted to focus on the ridges, the travel corridors, the staging areas, the bedding areas within this triangle.
Yeah, the zone.
Yep. So on bedding area 1A, I hunted the south side one morning and one afternoon, and within this time frame, and he didn't show up. A couple other deer came through, and then let's see, it was November the 13th, and I'm just like, okay, maybe he's gonna. I had a big wind shift. We had like 2 days of northwest winds, which prevented me from hunting the north side of this bedding area 1A that I talked about, right? And it had been, it'd been like 5 or 6 days since I had hunted that stand because I had other winds, or I decided to check out different parts of the farm. And now this wind shifted to a southwest, which opened the door for the north side of bedding area 1A. And I'm like, I'm going in there. I got to see if he's working in there. And so park my truck, same access route in, and I get to the base of my stand. I only put 3 sticks high. So I'm sitting at about 12 or 13 feet. Right. But I had awesome back cover with this pine tree, and I get 2 sticks up, getting ready to hang the third one, and there's a doe staring right at me. And so I had to creep down back to the ground, and I had the wind, so she really couldn't tell what I was. She's, trying to figure out what I am. And all of a sudden, this like 130 class 4-year-old just like starts chasing her around this bedding area. And and this is ground level within 20 yards of me.
Wow.
And kicks up another doe, and they kind of work their way away, which thank God, because I was thinking I was going to have to shoot this doe just so she wouldn't bust out, like blow at me. So thank God that buck came through, and I'd say he's 130 class. I think he was a 9 or a 10 or an 8. I really couldn't tell. I think I said he was an 8, but he could have been something different. And so I get up, set up, and instantly there's deer moving. I can see deer moving through these bedding areas in the staging area. Button buck comes through, spike buck comes through, another like 115, 120 inch, 10.2-year-old starts coming through. They're all working their way. Doe comes through. Eventually, these 2 does that this 1 4-year-old had chased out of there come back, and they begin to feed under this big oak tree for an hour or so. They've just kind of planted their flag there and have made this home. And I'm just sitting there watching these does come through. And now it's starting to get to somewhere around 4 o'clock. So I stand up, and the does are still sitting there. I feel, everything's relaxed. Another spike buck or young buck comes through and walks right in front of me. He goes into the bedding area and checks them. He's pushing these does around a little bit. Eventually he leaves, and somewhere around 4 o'clock, 4:15, this doe on the opposite ridge just sprints. She's sprinting right at me, and she jumps up on the ridge that I was hunting, comes into about 30 yards, and just chills. And she's looking over her shoulder and looking over her shoulder and looking over her shoulder. Eventually,
there's nothing better than that. It's coming.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, oh, something is right behind her. Something is right behind her, and nothing came. Ugh. And I was like, what's going on here? Like that is the sign of a doe getting chased. Mm-hmm. And so she goes and feeds with these other 2 does, and her body language changes. She calms down. She just goes into feed mode, and then she stops looking behind her. Then I hear something behind me. And so I turn around thinking, okay, maybe a different buck is looped and is checking this, this part of the bedding area behind me. And I'm looking. And so I'm turned around in the stand at this point, and I think it was like a spike buck just kind of milling around doing something behind me. And all of a sudden it's brrrr, and I hear something running in towards me. And sure enough, it's the buck I get a shot at, but he's coming in. And the first thing that went through my head is dork. It's dork. Like, are you kidding me? It's
finally.
Dork. Finally. It's like the first ever encounter I'm going to have with this deer. And so I grab my bow, and I then get like a 1 second look at him. I'm like, okay, his brows are too short. He's not dork, but he's a shooter. And drew back, and he's trotting. And, this all happens within like a 30-second window. I drew back, and he bull rushes into where the does were. And luckily he stopped right where they're a little bit behind him, but right where they were at. And he stops, puts his head down, and I let the arrow go, and I smoke him. And just a hair back, but I knew I hit long. You get some of these shots where you're just like, dude, that deer is going to die. Like you're very confident, unlike last year where I didn't see the impact. I didn't have to, I was low in the stand, whatever. This was a standing, perfect form, anchor, everything. Took my breath, pulled the trigger, hit him, mule kicked. And this was at about 4:30. So it's starting to get dark in the timber. And he does the mule kick. He doesn't run. And he starts walking away into this thickness. Right. And then you have, why isn't he running? Right. And you're like, oh, Jesus, man. Hopefully I didn't really gut shoot him, but I was confident in it. Right. So I'm scanning, and I can't see him. So wait till a little bit before dark, right? And I get out of my tree. I don't even go looking for him. I just go back to the house, get dressed, get my stepdad. And I'm like, dude, I feel very confident. I feel I double lunged him. Just back a hair, but I double lunged him. Mm-hmm. And grab my stepdad. We get ready, come back out, and we start scanning. And there's no blood at impact, which is kind of to be expected at this point, unless you just like smoke a heart, you give them a couple jumps before they start. And we weren't finding a ton of blood within the first 10 yards of this. And then it's by this time it's pitch black. So we got like 5 big flashlights. We're trying to scan everything. And eventually we run up on some blood and it's dark. And I'm like, maybe it was further back than I thought. And I hit liver, but still, and that might explain why he didn't take off running, because historically for me, if you hit liver, they just hunch up and they just creep away, right? They don't run unless you double lung them or you spook them somehow. And I mean, here's the short of it. And in another 15 yards, there he was laying dead. And I had this huge smile on my face. Long story short, the way he came in, he was just a hair quartering towards me. So I hit front side lung, backside liver.
Gotcha.
And then he started to open up, and he was dead in 20 yards from where I shot him. And I really didn't know what he was at the time. And as I walk up to him, I'm like, I shot a 3-year-old. And that's what even if you look at the pictures, you're like, dude, that looks like a 3-year-old deer. But here's what was amazing of this. He didn't look like he had a huge body. And then I walk up on him, pick the head up, and I start to observe the animal. And he was so worn down. I don't know if this deer was sick or if he had just already been through a hard rut, but his back end was bones. Like his spine was sticking out. His hips were sticking out. His front shoulders were kind of scooped in. His neck was big, and he had an absolutely huge head, but it was thin. Like, you know what I mean? It just looked like someone deflated a deer a little bit. And so
you kind of did.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah. Just
sucked. When we cleaned him, there was no fat on his body at all. Huh. So I don't know if he was sick or
there's no injury. There's no like big bruise on him. Like get hit by a car or another deer or something like that.
Another puncture wound on his side, but it wasn't a broadhead. It was probably from fighting, if I had to guess, because he had a broken tine, and then he knocked another tine off when he ran into a tree. It looked like when he fell. So, never seen this deer before. He was a beautiful, like if he had all his antlers on him, he would have been like a mainframe 9. He has split brows and then one split G2, and he has a ton of mass around his main beams. He has a lot of mass on that buck has a lot of mass, and he made me go, so I shot him. And so there's a chance he's a 3-year-old, but I honestly think he's a 4-year-old. And I could not be happier with this outcome from the pure fact that you get into a routine now. It's like, this is the first time in my entire life that I've gone on a run this long, right? 4 years in a row, shot 4 different bucks using my own personal philosophy and my own personal strategy on how I approach hunting a season. And I've been observing, I've been learning, I've been changing when I need to, and I've found success out of that. And that, the deer is always the cherry on top, but my strategy worked again, even though it took longer than what it has in the past. I'm very happy with the outcome of this season. And I don't know, I'm jacked, man.
It's a good feeling. That's a very good feeling. So what was your biggest takeaway? Your number one lesson or something that really hit home for you after this whole thing came together?
Yeah. So the lesson I would say would be when I started hitting the obstacles, like no mature deer on trail camera, no mature deer sightings. Now I had a hard stop of the 17th. I had 5 days left to hunt. I was going through a couple of these sits without seeing any deer. I started to realize that, hey, I might need to change what I want the outcome to be, right? I may not be holding out for Gnarly Charlie anymore, because although I did see him, I think it was like 3 days previous, I knew that I had a freezer to fill, and I knew, so to be honest with you, I was possibly going to start shooting does on some of my sits if they offered me really good shots, and if it was slow and if they weren't getting chased. So I still wanted to fill my freezer, but I still wanted to shoot a mature buck. And I felt like I did the right thing by changing my goal based off of what I was seeing from the timber, and still continuing to go with my game plan and change my game plan as needed, and not just get into woe is me, I'm not seeing anything, boo hoo. You just keep grinding, and you keep grinding, and you look at your maps, and you think about all the data and intel that you've had, not from that year, but through all the years. And that helps me put my tree stands in the position that I wanted to. I had the encounters that I wanted to. And eventually that routine led me to this encounter and the harvest of a great deer.
Do you do anything different next year? Is there anything that happened that you now will say, you know what? Okay, this is something that does, even though it worked out this year, this is something that has to change next time around.
Yeah. The time frame.
Just shifting it later.
Shifting it later, a week later. I want to hunt up until Thanksgiving. And I think that, just like we've already talked about, I think if it's not hot, go away for a day, come back.
Yeah.
I've found now through these, because I think a lot of people, what they do is they sit in a tree stand and they look at things with blinders. They're in a tree stand and they say, okay, this is what's happening today, when you need to think not only about last year, but next year as well. So now I know, like, hopefully Gnarly Charlie makes it through the season, right? That would be awesome if he does. If he does, he does. If he doesn't, he doesn't. But if he does, I got intel on him on this spur ridge. I got more intel from him on trail cameras. So now I got a straight line now between point A and point B that I'm really going to focus on next year. I'm going to bring more trail cameras in. I'm going to bring more tree stands in. I'm going to be scouting more within this line late season. And hopefully I can set up so I got him trapped next year, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I totally know what you mean.
Yeah. So it's basically now, dude, it's so crazy. I celebrated this harvest, but my mind is already going. It's just how I operate. The end is also the beginning, man. And it's just, for me, I never stop. I can't stop. I'm already thinking about, right now I'm looking on a map, on this topo map of where I want to have a tree stand next year. And, I'm thinking about crop rotation, and I'm thinking about what I want to do next year to hopefully put all that odds in my favor for another successful season. So,
well, we talk about all the time. It's really the process.
Yeah,
that
absolutely
gets us. It's the end result, of course, is important and we strive for it, but it's everything that leads us to that moment that makes this thing so damn addicting.
Yeah. I've been talking a long time, but I just want to, I really want to reiterate how much fun I had this year, because I didn't get stressed out. I went in with low expectations. I knew I had to put my process in, like you said. And once I do that, it's almost like it becomes autopilot. And once it becomes autopilot, you can take the time to not just worry about deer hunting. But man, I saw 3 bobcats this year. One of them was hunting while I was in the stand. I got to watch him hunt. Wow. That was sweet. I saw a badger. I saw birds. I saw, it's just, you can be a sponge and just absorb nature. And that's what I do this all for anyway. And, man, and the fact that now I have meat I got meat in the freezer because of this too. That's just a win. It's like I had so many wins this season that, I don't know. I had an absolute blast, and it reminded me why I love doing it so much.
So are you done? Are you going to shoot some does? Are you going to go out of state and keep it rolling?
No, dude.
What's next?
If I get the opportunity to go maybe shoot a doe, I'll do it. I'm going to check trail cameras before late season, maybe. But as you know, and as everybody else with family knows, there comes a time where the brownie points are done, right? They are used up, and I want to maybe go out and shoot a doe because I got 3 more doe tags left, but I also don't want to burn any bridges. And honestly, I just want to hang with the fam for a while and enjoy what I have. And then maybe I'll get out, maybe I won't, but I've already had so much fun and success as a selfish bow hunter this year that I think I need to turn some attention back towards the family for a little bit. And after a week or two, maybe I'll get out again, or maybe I'll get out late season. But now it's time to focus on the family and back to business. And dude, yeah.
I hear you. I hear you.
So, dude, I talked way too much.
You're all right. That's what we're here to do.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co, and make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land? Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
Good talk.
I want to hear about your rut, but I have to ask you a question because I saw you in a ground blind with your dad, right?
Yeah.
I do not come from a quote unquote hunting family. Like, I learned all this stuff on my own, kind of. And I've had somewhat of a mentor, but like, what's it like hunting with your dad?
It's really cool, man. It was a really fun thing to get to do because I grew up hunting with my dad. We've got a really interesting kind of hunting dynamic though. And it was fun to be able to do this. And I've got to do it a few times over the last handful of years because growing up with my dad, right, we'd go out. We've got this family deer camp up in northern Michigan. We didn't see many deer ever, but we always had a great time just sitting out there together, telling stories, just being up there. That was a really fun thing for me to do from the time I was 4 till the time I was, 10, 11, 12. At some point around there is when I started hunting on my own. But the unique thing with my dad is that he is significantly visually impaired. So he's got a just a real challenge when it comes to hunting as far as seeing things. So because of that, he had only killed one deer his whole life. When he was 16, he killed a buck. And then all the way through the whole time we hunted together, he never shot a buck. All the way until I became an adult, he never shot a deer of any kind, except for that very first one. I remember there's a story back when I was a little kid, and I might have told this before, but I was 8 or 9 and we were hunting together, and I saw a buck. Me and my dad are sitting together. I see a buck, and I tell him, Dad, there's a buck. And he can't see it. And as a kid, not being very sensitive to the issue, I got mad at him. And I'm like, Dad, he's right there. Just give me the gun. I'll shoot him. Just give me the gun. So we joke about it today, but it was something that my dad has been a hell of a trooper to keep on hunting all these years, given the fact that it's a lot more difficult for him than a lot of people. So over the last decade or so, I've been able to try to give back to him a little bit and take him out and hunt some of the places that I can hunt. And so, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I know we told this story back then, but I set him up on one of my main Michigan spots, and he killed a little buck with me and him sitting together in a box blind. And that was awesome. First deer he'd killed since he was 16. And then he shot one a few years after that on his own when I was hunting up at deer camp with him. So that was a really cool thing. But now I wanted to try to get him a shot at his first buck older than a year and a half, because his 3 bucks he killed up to that point were all 1.5 years olds. I'm not even sure he's even seen a buck older than a year and a half. Because right up north, we almost never see anything other than 1.5 year old bucks. And then the only other place he'd ever hunted, other than when he came with me, was our 3-acre property behind the house that I grew up in. So he would bow hunt back there sometimes, and he's seen a few bucks back there. So this year we thought, let's bring him out to the back 40 for a few days. He could get a couple days off work during the rut and get his first bow hunting rut, the peak of the rut, hopefully on this property. It's hopefully going to be really good, and get him a shot at his first 2-year-old or older buck. I really thought oh gosh, it should be easy to get a shot at a, nice 2-year-old 8-pointer that he would think is the biggest buck in the world. And that'd be such a cool way to give back to him. So we're kind of skipping towards the middle end of my rutcation, but I'll finish off this portion of it, and then I'll rewind back to the beginning, because it was kind of this story is sort of a microcosm for my whole rut. The process was the fun part. The end result wasn't there. It was great to get to spend a couple days with my dad out there hunting. We took him out. I had set up a handful of ground blinds in the summer, knowing that he was going to come out. But things just did not pan out this was on the back 40 we took him, so that new farm. Things on the back 40 did not pan out at all how I thought they would, as far as deer numbers, deer activity, the way they use the property. It was just very, very, very different than I expected. As it stands right now, it's the slowest I've ever seen a property in southern Michigan that I've ever hunted. I found a lot of spots in southern Michigan. You always see deer. You always see young bucks, at least. We had a hard time seeing anything on the back 40. This year in total, there were a handful of good hunts, and I had a brief moment that I'll talk about of some things coming together. But overall, it was pretty tough sledding. And unfortunately for my dad, that continued. We had a couple fun days sitting in the blind together, just telling stories, reminiscing, laughing, giving each other a hard time. And that was one of the best parts of my entire rut, 3 weeks. That was tops right there. He had an opportunity at a 1.5-year-old buck. We had a 1 buck come in, and it was a little 5-pointer. And my dad got excited about it. I said, hey, if you want to take a crack at it, take a crack at it. He's never killed a deer with his bow, and he's using a crossbow. He's never killed a buck with any kind of deer with archery equipment, so that would be awesome if he did. But he decided to pass on it because, we had these high hopes, and I'd shown him pictures of some of the deer that we had gotten on camera and that were hopefully somewhere around. So he decided to pass on it, which I think is the first time he's ever passed on a buck, which is cool. Unfortunately, we just didn't get any more opportunities. That was it. We had some fun times out there, some good stories, but just the deer did not cooperate. So that was the hunt with him. Overall, though, it was about the quality time. and a great reminder for me of what matters most. And I think that came back time and time again throughout this whole rut, is reminding myself of what really matters. Yes, I want to kill a mature buck. Yes, I want to have this end result. In the end, does that really matter? Not that much. So spending that time with my dad, that's what really mattered. Taking a few days off to help out my wife and be there for my son, that's what really matters. Taking some time midday when I usually would tell myself I should be hunting, taking some of that time off to help out, that probably is what really matters. When you put in 3 weeks of hunting really, really hard, and you try so much for one deer and it doesn't come together, and he's probably going to get shot by somebody else, and that's frustrating. And then you have to take a step back and realize, you know what? It's just a deer. You've got a healthy family. You've got a roof over your head. Those are the things I kept coming back to time and time again over the course of the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So that's the ending of my story, is that those were the sentiments that I was left with after my 2019 rutcation. Now, let me take you back to the beginning and explain how I got there.
Right.
So, we talked last somewhere in, middle or late October. Basically, I had that Minnesota hunt, awesome experience, but we didn't see any deer. I had that really cool mentor hunt experience. That was fun. But once I got back from Minnesota and we got to the pre-rut time period, it's like late 20s in October, started to shift my focus to trying to kill this buck Tran. That one deer that I knew for sure is 4.5 years old on my main Michigan property. I'd seen him a bunch last year. I passed on him. Coming into this year, it was, hey, it's all about Tran. And you know me, I get really excited about targeting that one deer. And I've got this one main farm where I've been really lucky to have an opportunity where these deer have a chance of making it back. So it seems like almost every year there's at least one deer that I had history with in past years. And that just is the most fun for me, is when I get to know a deer, like we talked about. You get to know a deer, get to put together those pieces, figure out the chess moves. That is just so cool. So I get hung up on that and really excited about it. And Tran was the one deer I knew for sure fit that bill. So he was my target buck this year. Now, there was 2 other really nice deer that I had been seeing through the summer. There's one deer I just kind of called him the Big 9. Really nice, big 9-pointer. Probably like 130 class in that ballpark. And I saw him quite a bit during the summer when I'm glassing these soybean fields. And he ends up, though, after looking at him and looking at trail camera pictures, I'm really pretty darn certain. I'm certain he can't be older than 3. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to pass on him. And so I think we talked about this. I saw him on October 2nd, and I passed on him. I had a shot at him, like a 10-yard shot, and I passed on him on October 2nd. First time I'd ever passed on a buck of that caliber in Michigan. So that was cool. But then I'm feeling like, man, am I crazy? Like, people in Michigan don't pass on bucks like that. Am I nuts? But I really want to get a shot Tran. So I did it. Now, fast forward, it's late October. I hunted the back 40 with Doug Duran for a couple days. I thought we'd be having some activity. I was starting to get some more pictures of this buck I was calling the Wide 8 on that farm. So I thought we were going to be getting into it, but it was just dead. We saw just a button buck and a 1.5-year-old buck, and I think a doe. Yeah, that's over the course of 3 days of hunting out there. So I was really disappointed in that.
I'm going to ask you a quick question. Why did you think, or why do you feel that farm was dead? Because you had this moment of excitement about the back 40 that you started having some good deer show up on camera, and you felt that the closer you get to the rut, the late October timeframe, you felt it was going to start getting better and pick up.
Yeah.
What changed?
So I still don't know if I know 100% for sure. I can only theorize, right? But my thoughts are this. I think that there's a ton of activity in the summer. We were there all over the place, filming all these things, having all these people see it. We were all over the place. So there wasn't a whole lot of action there during the summer because of that. Then September comes, we get one mature buck that starts showing up on trail camera. That's the Wide 8. Big bodied, definitely an older deer, just a Wide 8-pointer. Not very much going from an antler growth standpoint, but I was stoked because he was definitely a mature deer, and that's what I was shooting for. So we had tried to do one basic improvement. Basically, we weren't able to, and we talked about this already, but just to recap, just did not have time to do any really significant changes to the property because of the filming schedule and the logistics of everything. So all we basically got to do were plant some food plots. And the food plots were supposed to be a blend of a variety of different things that would provide a lot of attraction over the course of the whole hunting season and beyond. But I was trying a new way of planting. I was trying to do everything no-till this year. So without diving too deep into that, it just amounted to a very different way of planting stuff that's better for the soil, better for the environment, better hopefully in a lot of different ways. But what ended up happening is that it didn't turn out very good for me on the back 40. Most of the blend that I planted did not come up. I basically just got some cereal grains, like oats came up. And that was kind of it. And oats are attractive earlier in the year. They're typically not very attractive later in the year. Now, that can be different based on where you're at. But for me, it's just not a home run once you get into November or later. Well, that's all we had, though. So early in the season, early in October, there was a decent number of does feeding in those fields. I got some trail camera pictures of the white-8 feeding in those fields. I thought it was going to be good. Like you said, I was feeling, okay, we're coming along. Stuff's only going to get better as we get into the rut. But as we got towards the rut, as the pre-rut arrived, and once the rut got cranking, fewer and fewer and fewer deer being sighted. Just did not see many deer at all. Now, we never saw a ton of deer out there. But I think here's the things that could be to blame. Number one, we just didn't have enough good food on the farm. We had basically those oats. We didn't have a lot of them planted, and they very quickly went from like a decent food source to a food source that deer weren't really hitting very much at all. I'm used to hunting spots with, a food source that you're going to have a good number of deer, a good number of does passing through every day in the morning, every day in the evening, coming in and out, something. Here, you would hunt what looks like a terrific food source, and you'd see one deer a day or something like that. Yeah. And I'm hunting it as much as I possibly can. Now, this is a new thing for me. It's hard because it's not just me hunting. It's me and a cameraman. And on all of our hunts so far, there's also been a guest and a cameraman every time. So you've got 4 guys going in and out of this property every time you hunt, which made an impact, I'm sure. I did everything I possibly could to reduce the impact, but I'm sure it made an impact. So that's happening. And then we're just not seeing these deer like I thought we would. And I think it's number one, the food source we have was not very attractive compared to what was around us. Around me is a lot of good properties with a lot of guys that are managing deer, I've come to find, and a lot of people with great food plots. And then secondly, just like you have, thousands of acres of standing corn all around us. So on 3 different sides are standing cornfields just off of the neighboring properties, sort of. So I can't hunt the edge of the standing corn where you might be able to take advantage of something, but it's there, so there's not much bedding on our farm. Our farm, secondly, has these big open fields that I was hoping would grow in and be thick and hopefully still get used by deer. Even this year, before we get to improve them, turns out they're pretty much deer deserts right now. No deer are bedding in them. Very few deer pass through them. So more than 50% of the farm is this desert. All we had is this swamp. And so I could hunt the swamp some, and I did, and that's where I ultimately had some success. But I couldn't take the guests in there because all the guests had to hunt from ground blinds. You can't see anything in there from a ground blind. So there was different challenges like that as I was trying to balance all the different things going on. But I think the standing corn was a big factor. I think not having quality food on the farm was a factor because there was so much of it everywhere else. The old fields being a desert were a factor. Having this increased amount of impact compared to what I would typically do was probably a factor. And then, I don't know, maybe it's just, I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know what else it could be, but those are the theories I have so far that led me to the point where October 26th, 27th, 28th, which are historically pretty darn good days around here, at least for seeing young bucks bumping around and doing things, we saw almost nothing.
Yeah.
That was very disappointing.
That sucks, man.
Yeah, so that whole thing was frustrating. But then, so that happened, but I said, okay, that's all right. It's back to my other main Michigan property, which in late October, it's usually the very best time of year on this farm. I've had all sorts of good encounters with mature bucks at that time of year on this farm, feeling good. I decided, okay, it's time to get serious about trying to kill Tran. I basically left him alone the whole month of October, other than the very beginning. Now it's time to get after him. And I will fast forward through the whole last week of October, though, and basically tell you that nothing worked out. I didn't see him, wasn't seeing him, wasn't seeing any of the mature bucks, wasn't seeing any kind of pre-rut behavior. I wasn't diving into bedding areas or anything. I was still playing it safer. But that was disappointing as well. Just wasn't happening for me. Around the same time, I also started looking at some more pictures of this other buck I was seeing on the farm. So I told you about that big 9-pointer I passed on. Right. You know about Tran. He's the 4.5-year-old that I definitely want to shoot. He's a 4-year-old, big 8-pointer, 2 years of history. But then there's this third deer. And this third deer showed up a lot during the summer. He was the first buck I got on trail camera in the summer. Probably the most consistent on camera, most consistent to see out in the fields. And we started calling him RB, which is short for risky business, because he was going to be a buck that came in and you'd really want to shoot him, but he's probably just a 3-year-old. And I really wanted to try to hold out for a 4-year-old this year, specifically Tran. If not Tran, then a buck that's like a no-brainer. Yes, he's a mature 4-year-older buck. And this buck in the summer, I'm thinking, okay, he's 3. But then I'm looking at trail camera pictures in middle and late October, and now I'm thinking, man, he looks like he's got a bigger body. Maybe he is 4. And I'm thinking, I'm back and forth. And I basically this whole last week of October, I keep on looking at pictures. I'm like, if he shows up and if he looks like a tank, I might have to shoot him. Because he might be, I don't know. And then I go back and I look at other trail camera pictures from last year, and I see a buck last year that really looks like it could be this deer, but he was definitely a 2-year-old last year. Like, there's no way he could be a 3-year-old last year. So now I'm thinking, okay, no, he's got to be 3. But then, the next day, then I'm like, but maybe it's not him. And so I just had this whole thing going on in my head. Halloween arrives, snowstorm hits. I see Tran for the first time during hunting season. Basically, he's on the neighbors. He chases a doe towards me. The doe turns, runs out into a field across the way. He follows her. Very exciting. Finally got to see the buck I'm after, but, wasn't really in threat of actually shooting him. November 1st arrives. Now it's time to get serious about getting into those bedding areas. And I will say one of the nice things for me over the last year or two, definitely this year, sort of like you said, that good feeling you get when you start to realize, like, my strategy works, things are clicking, I'm figuring things out. Yep. So this property I've talked about a lot over the years, but it's a 87-acre farm, of which about half of it is the big open fields. So I've got like 40 to 45 acres of like huntable stuff that's either some swamp or edges of the edges of the field that I can hunt, or some grassy stuff, or some kind of thin strips of timber that poke out into that field. That's what this farm looks like. The early years I hunted here, I hunted a lot of field edge, some of the food plots, and, I had some sightings, had some encounters, but wasn't getting a lot of shot opportunities at the old buck or two that might be out there. Finally, I started realizing where these best doe bedding areas are on the back of the farm, and now every year for the past few years, I've been putting my time in back there in the mornings, and I'm having encounters, and I'm getting shots at better deer. And so that's what happened on the morning of November 1st. I sat back at the downwind side of one of these doe bedding areas, kind of where a whole lot of movement pinches in, where there's kind of a chunk of timber and a swamp on the south side, and then a thin strip of timber in the middle with some doe bedding in it, and then a bigger chunk of timber to the north. And so it's downwind of a doe bedding area and a pinch, and it's dynamite because of that. So I see a lot of young bucks coming through. Everything that passes through this area comes within range. I mean, it's perfect. And I see a big set of antlers coming through the timber towards me, but kind of angling away. I fire off a grunt, and that deer turns and starts walking right at me, and look through my binos.
That is the best feeling. That is the best feeling, where
it really
you
is.
do that contact grunt, and they're just like, uh-oh,
yep.
What's that over there?
I'm
and
like,
they turn
oh,
around.
Crap. Here we go. And so that's exactly what happened. I pull a binos to get a better look, and I'm like, oh, it's RB. And then the next thought I have is, oh shit, what am I going to do? And he's coming on a string, and I'm like, what am I doing right now? Should I shoot him? Should I pass him? Should I shoot him? Should I pass him? I grab my bow. He's getting closer. I get set. I get lined up. Should I shoot him? Should I pass him? Should I shoot him? Should I pass him? He's at 30 yards. He's at 25 yards. He steps into my shooting lane at 20 yards. I draw back. I put the pin behind his shoulder. Should I shoot him? Should I pass him? And I just couldn't bring myself to pull the trigger. Because if I pull the trigger, I'm done. I don't ever want to take $2 off this farm. And I know I wanted to save a tag for the back 40 still. So I was basically, I've got $1 on this property. And if I shoot RB, that means the hunt for Tran's done. And I just, in that moment, I didn't want that to be the case. So I let him go. And he walks through, and man, does he look good though as he walks away. I'm like, oh my gosh. You know, he's got a pretty good sized body on him. He's a really nice 10-pointer. He might be like mid 130s, 130, 135, 10-pointer in Michigan. He'd be one of my biggest bucks in Michigan ever. A buck that pretty much anyone in the state would, you know, their jaw would drop for most guys. And so I'm sitting there thinking, am I the stupidest person in the world? Did I just do that? But at the same time, you know, I just wanted to still hunt Tran. So that happened. I will fast forward from there. That great encounter happened. Still chasing Tran. Next day, have an encounter with Tran. This was my best encounter with Tran up to that point and really for the rest of the season. I move about 100 yards from that location to the downwind side of another bedding area. That's kind of, there's a sort of a line of doe bedding areas on this property. And I just hunt on the downwind side of this line. And in various points, you're going to get bucks that come cruising through there. And there's a few kind of pinches where the travel gets narrowed down a little bit more. I hunted one where I had that RB encounter. I moved up to the next one for the next day. And first thing in the morning, I hear some noise behind me. I look, I see Tran like 40 yards away in this really thick stuff. I can't shoot into it. It's not even shooting light yet, but I see him. I'm like, holy crap. The basic gist of this, I think I mentioned this story already to Spencer on a Rut Fresh Radio episode. Basic gist of it is that he ended up being in this thick, nasty stuff just behind me with a doe, and he popped out eventually maybe 20 minutes later, and I can see him now finally. He's at like 45 or 50 yards, and he's locked on a doe. And nothing I could do was going to get him to come the next 10, 15 yards to get closer to me. And he followed that doe off into the neighbors. And then he circled back and surprisingly, chased a group of 4 does towards me. Got to like 45 or 40, but no shot opportunity. And then stopped and turned and went back towards that original doe. And that was this one really close call with Tran. I thought, man, it's going to happen when he came in that second time. He looks amazing. I mean, just a huge mainframe 8-pointer, at least for around here. And it was really exciting, not quite close enough. And then, you know, I repositioned.
Was this a, like, that was the closest that you got to him?
That was the closest I ever did end up getting to him.
Man.
So like 45 yards is probably about where he was at.
At 45 yards at all, did he have an opening?
Oh, like could I shot him at 45 yards? No, because he came running in facing me and then immediately spun away and went the other way because he was chasing those 4 does. And so ran it behind the does, stopped, turned, and ran right back towards the original doe he was with. So no. I think the only time I really could have taken a shot, and I would never shoot this far, but he was broadside at 60, just standing there with the doe for a long time, but never presented a real shot within my range. Yeah. So I moved that day. I got down from the tree, ran back, went to my house, got a saddle and sticks. Came back in there and repositioned 30 yards to get to where those deer had been coming in and out. I hoped that same doe would cycle back in and give me a shot this time. Didn't happen. Then I had to leave the next day, I think it was, because that was when we were going to start filming on the back 40. So that was a bummer. But I'll skip what happened in the back 40 to continue the Tran story. So I took a 7-day break in the middle because we had a scheduled time with the camera crew to be at the back 40. So I already told you what happened with my dad. Had that happen, I had 4 or 5 days that I got to hunt myself, and another guy, Ben O'Brien, was there hunting too. So that all happens. I come back. It's maybe I don't know. Well, no, this is when I took 2 days off to get back with the family. Took 2 days, tried to help out around the house, just get the family feeling good. And one of those nights, I was, of course, there with the family, but I had to at least try to glass one of the fields one night. So I get out there and glass a field, and Tran comes out on the night of the 10th, bumping does around. So I'm like, he's there. I was excited.
Within
he was still
shooting
there.
range of one of your stands?
Let me think about this. Nah, not really. If I had sat that infamous hay bale blind, I probably could have. I maybe could have got. If I sat in the poop blind, I maybe would have had a long shot at him. But not like a gimme shot. But he was definitely in the zone. So then I get back out there the next day, and I have now 4 days left before gun season, and I go back in the next morning to one of these bedding areas, and I see this doe behind me. And there's a whole bunch of different bucks, kind of young bucks passing through and does passing through. I'm downwind of this doe bedding area again, and I see this one doe behind me. And she's maybe 45 yards away, and I notice her. She's just standing there still, kind of looking around. And so I look, I glass around her, try to see, is there buck following behind her? Is there a buck there? Nothing. Okay, keep looking. There's other activity in front of me. I'm watching this side. I look back, that doe's still standing there. What's she doing? I look around, can't see anything. Okay, now I got to focus back on the front again. Another young buck passes through. Well, I don't know how long this went on for, maybe 45 minutes, an hour. I look back there, and that damn doe is still there. And I think, golly, that doe is acting like a locked down doe. She's acting like she's just standing here. The only time I ever see a doe just stand kind of in the open, she was right in the edge of this thicket. Is if she's, if a buck and a doe are locked down and she's just standing there. And I keep thinking, man, is there a buck standing with her and I just can't see her? And as I have this thought, I pull up my binos again to look one more time, and there's a buck right behind her, and it's Tran. I'm like, holy crap, there he is right there. But they're directly downwind of me. This is like the one area, well, not directly downwind of me, I guess it'd be, but sort of downwind of me. And she's been standing there this whole time. He is, what I don't know is if he had been there, was he standing with her, but just inside the thick stuff this whole time and I never knew it? Or was he just cruising through and I happened to look that time that he passed through? I don't know which it was, but I see him there for a second and he's walking straight away into the next bedding area down. And I can't grunt to him or do anything because just like you said, he's downwind of me or very close to being downwind of me. I don't want to encourage him to get spooked anymore. He disappears. I continue to try to take stabs at him. I hunt these bedding areas in the mornings. In the evenings, there's two main food sources. There's a cut bean field on one side of the farm. There's a standing cornfield on the other side. I kind of bounce back and forth. If I saw him, like those days I saw him up in the north bedding area, I would say, okay, best chances he's going to be with the doe on the north side. They'll go to the bean field. If I saw him in the south bedding area, there's a slightly better chance he might come out with her to the south field there in the cornfields to try to hunt closer to that. I ended up seeing him one more night off the north field in the neighbor's bedding area, and nothing that I could possibly take a shot at. I actually saw him on the neighbor's bedding area, gave him a grunt, and he circled several hundred yards, and I can see him multiple different times because he's passing through bushes and autumn olive bushes and different crap like that. So he disappears, then he shows up, then he disappears, shows up. You can see him go all the way from almost due north of me to all the way almost due south to get downwind. So he passes towards, last time I saw him, he was heading towards my downwind side. I couldn't see my downwind side because there's some thick stuff there. And he probably went downwind of me. I don't know. So that was disappointing. And this takes me to my last morning, my last day. I think.
What date is this?
November 14th.
No, 14th. Okay.
Yeah. And maybe I can't remember if the encounter I'm about to tell you about happened on the morning of the 13th or the morning of the 14th, but there's basically two more encounters worth mentioning. This one is back downwind of that doe bedding area that I first talked about, where I passed on RB on November 1st. I go back there again. It's, I think, probably my best spot because it's downwind of the doe bedding area and it's the best little pinch I have there of sorts. So I kind of came to see this year that there's, if it's going to happen, that's one of the very best chances of where it might happen. So I'm sitting there again and I look behind me and I see a big rack coming my way. I get excited, pull up the binos, it's RB again. And sure as shit, here he comes. And now I'm thinking, should I shoot him? Should I pass him? Should I shoot him? It's now, almost bow season's almost done. He's a pretty nice buck. I still don't know. I still hadn't made a decision up to this point. Even this whole time I kept thinking about it and still was like, I would say, no, you passed on him once. You want to kill Tran, just stick with it. And then a day later, though, I'd be like, man, your wife's pregnant and tired. Your son's, would love to see his dad. If you shot this buck, you'd be done. You wouldn't feel the pressure to keep hunting anymore. Maybe you should just end the season. Just get it done with. And then I'd go back and I'd say, man, if you shoot this buck, you're going to feel a little let down. You're going to walk up to him and be like, he's a nice buck. But in the back of your mind, you're going to be bummed that you're not chasing Tran. You'll be bummed that you gave in or that you settled. So this whole thing's been playing on my head over and over and over again. So he passes by at like 15, 20 yards, and I don't even grab my bow this time. I just film him with my phone and say, you know what? You made your decision. You're not going to settle. You're not going to change your goal. He's an awesome buck. Hopefully he makes it to next year. You really want to kill Tran, stick with it. And so I watch him go. He passes by. Easy chip shot, goes on through. Now I have the same feelings. I'm like, gosh, are you an idiot, Mark? What are you doing? Go through the whole thing. 20 minutes later, I hear a snap. Here he is again, walking right through. And this time I grab my bow. I'm like, damn it, Mark, just get it done with. So then I grab my bow and I start to get in position. Like maybe I should just shoot him. I'm about to draw back, and then a doe pops in and he jogs off after, and I didn't have to make the decision again. Yeah. So that was that with RB.
I was there this year too with that 3-year-old, that 11-pointer 3-year-old that I passed, probably low 150s. I passed him like high 140s, low 150s. I passed him 3 different times this year. And I mean like at 10 yards 3 different times. Yeah. And the first time was like, okay, we're not going to pass. The second time was like, well, the rut is we're in the middle of the rut. And then the last time was like, it could be over right now. Right. It could all be over right now.
Man, it's a tough one. I don't know. I still have been debating back and forth. What's the right thing? So there's all these different things going through your mind. Like I just mentioned a whole bunch of them. I had this original goal. I want to shoot for sure mature buck now. And Tran's really, really the one I want to shoot. But if a mystery buck came through that I saw that was no doubt about it, a tanker, I would have taken a crack at him too, probably at this point. But I still was just so unsure about him. Like I could convince myself one day that maybe he's 4, and then the next day, like, no, he's probably 3. And I just didn't want to do that. But on the other hand, I post it on social media, and then you got all these guys say, oh my God, why don't you shoot? Why don't you shoot? What are you doing? And then for a half second, you let that influence you. You're like, should I have shot? Am I an idiot? And like, no, you can't listen. You can't listen to these people. And then your buddies text you, and your buddies say, dude, what are you thinking? You're not going to see another buck like that in Michigan. That'd be your, second biggest archery buck in Michigan. You got to shoot that deer. And then it's like, no, you got to stick with what you want to do. And then this other weird side of you says, man, you work in the hunting industry. People are wanting to see that you know what you're talking about. You never shoot anything because you're passing on these deer. And then I say, no, you can't let that influence you. But like that debate, all these different voices, the angel and the devil on your shoulder saying, do this, do that, do this, do that. That was very much the story for my rut with this deer. Having those opportunities, having that other big 9 I passed on. I passed on a really nice 8-pointer. My first day in North Dakota. I passed on more bucks this year of like nice bucks for me than I ever have. I've never done that. I had 4 shot opportunities this year in Michigan at a 3.5-year-old buck in Michigan with my bow, which is a big deal around here. And I passed on them all. Just a few years ago, a 3.5-year-old was my target around here. So right. Part of me is like, what are you doing? And part of me says, hey, that's pretty damn cool, Mark, that you can pass that. You don't need to shoot that deer anymore. Keep it going. Keep pushing yourself. That's fun. So that all said, though, I had this like roller coaster of emotions of like, wow, this is awesome, seeing a really nice deer and passing it, to then, are you making a mistake? Are you just out here and that buck's going to get killed as soon as gun season comes in, and Tran's probably going to get killed by someone in gun season, and you'll have nothing to hunt and nothing to show for all the time you put in. And so where I settled on was the fact that, I'm going to hunt for why I really want to hunt. I'm not going to shoot a deer unless it's really, really, really going to be the deer that I'm excited about and that I've worked for. And in this case, I had those goals and I want to stick to those goals. And it's going to be Tran, or, if a surprise 4 or 5 year old buck shows up, that's amazing. But I'm not going to settle because someone else says I should shoot. So That's where I ended up. And the last night of the hunting season, I decided to hunt a spot I haven't hunted yet all year. It's a weird spot. It's right in the edge of the best bedding area around, but I can't hunt the bedding area. It's the neighbors. So I have to hunt the edge of a cut bean field. That said, I've seen this buck go out in that field multiple times. Several of the sightings, he crossed along through there. And many bucks in the past I've hunted have passed within range of the shooting of this tree stand. So I sat there with a risky wind. I knew it was a risky wind, but it was the last night before gun season. And I said, screw it. I'm going to throw a Hail Mary and, basically blowing out the top quarter of this bedding area, hoping that my buck would come out in the bottom 3 quarters. And Tran came out, but he came out in the top quarter, stepped out right downwind of me, 200 yards away. And I could see him on the neighbors, and he just stood there, looked in my direction for a few seconds, and then just kept on going. So I'm sure he got smell of something, and that was that. That was the end of the bow season. I do not know if Tran has made it through the last few days of gun season or not. I don't know if RB has made it. I don't know if the Big Nines made it. But that was my bow season on the Maine, Michigan farm. It's just a lot of question marks around shot decisions and holding out for one deer and the excitement of that versus the stress of that. That's kind of where my head's been. But that I've totally skipped over the one really good thing that happened during the rut, which was surprisingly in the place where I saw the least activity. So
1 second.
Yes.
In regards to Tran. Not only Tran, but you've played cat and mouse on your property before with Holyfield, right?
And then
so
Frank,
it's not like it's anything.
Yeah,
and Frank. So it's not like it's anything new, right?
6-shooter before that, yeah.
Yeah. So deer do get old in your area, around that area. There's a chance they can make it. The cool thing is passing this buck, it just solidifies that you're now potentially going to have another shooter to chase next year, right? Not just one, but 2.
That's the hope. You just never know. And I keep on waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? I mean, I've been lucky to have some of these bucks make it year after year. That is really unique. You know a bunch of my hunting buddies, Andy and Dustin and Josh and Ross and Peter and those guys and Corey, and they're constantly giving me crap about how nobody else in Michigan gets a chance to see these bucks year after year. Like I'm in some little weird microcosm or some weird sphere that's protecting these bucks, because all my buddies, all their deer get killed every year once the 15th hits. Like that's the group text message thread going on right now. Everyone's sharing pictures of the bucks that hunted all bow season that are now dead. They've shown up on somebody else's buck poll or Facebook page. And I've been lucky that I have been able to get at least one buck that I've seen previously is back every year for the last, 7-8 years now. But I just keep on, worrying that next year is going to change. And there's more people coming in to the area. I've met, there's some new hunters. Someone just bought a farm, one property away from me, who's really into hunting. Found out there's some 2 guys leasing a neighboring farm now that are really into hunting. There's a guy that usually didn't hunt his property. He just moved back, so he's going to be hunting more. Had a person come in trespassing from somewhere else that I spotted one day. So there's there's more and more people. There's always been a lot of people, but now I keep on feeling like, is this going to change things? I don't know. So there's worries, but there's hope, because yes, there have been deer that make it through and it's possible. So we'll see.
Yeah. But you killed something, dude.
I did.
You slayed. I
did kill something. So in the middle of all these things, I did have that week on the back 40, of which 4 days were mine to hunt. I got to hunt 4 days, a few days there with my dad, but the 4 days prior to that, I was hunting on my own. And the long story short of it is, went in on starting November 3rd, went in hunting the best spots. I had the spot I was calling the honey hole. I'd saved it all season, haven't touched it. It's native big blue stem grass and cedars and all this thick shrubby autumn olives and different things on this ridge next to the swamp. Super cool little area. I knew there's deer bedding in there. I've been getting pictures of the wide 8 coming in and out of it. I had a camera near the edge of this thing. So I went in there and hunted it the first day, expecting to see all sorts of bucks cruising this ridge, and nothing. Like, we saw a couple does and a 1.5 year old, and then that night, a 2.5-year-old buck came out, but much, much slower than I was expecting. And the next 2 days, it was the same kind of thing. Just a few does, a 1.5 year old. Like we talked about earlier, the whole thing about why this property has been much slower than I expected. Yeah, that's what I just sat and thought about for 3 days. Why is this like this? It's November, it's November 3rd, 4th, 5th. It should be great. But the third day, it was either the third or fourth day, I decided, all right, we got to switch it up to a new spot. So I had another spot that I prepped that was at the inside corner of where one of our old fields came down the ridge and pushed into the edge of the swamp. So there's an inside corner of this field that juts into the swamp. And that ridge with the honey hole, that thick ridge, drops down at the same point too. So the ridge pinches to the edge of the swamp and the field pinches to the edge of the swamp. And I thought to myself, gosh, if anything is cruising the edge of the swamp or cruising the ridge, and if they want to stay in the cover but not be in the really wet stuff, they've got to come right through this edge. Set up there, hunted it, not seeing much at all. Could hear a buck chasing a doe in the thick swamp but could never see them. And it's 9:30 in the morning. Not a single buck has come cruising through. I'm just having these same thoughts in my mind, like, what is going on? Why are there not a few bucks cruising through? Why am I not seeing some 2-year-olds? Like, this is a good area. I know it's a good area. I know who's around here. I've talked to the neighbors now. I know that there's deer in the zone. It's got a lot of good things going for it. This property does. We should be seeing something. And 9:30 hits, and I'm like, all right, I'm getting a snack. So I bust out a bag of Chex Mix. I'm eating some Chex Mix, and I look over my shoulder on the hill behind me, and I see a buck running across this old brushy field. And immediately I'm like, that's a good buck. Pull up my binos, and I realize that's the wide 8. And he's running across this field behind me, grab my grunt tube, do the exact same thing we talked about earlier, just let off a brah, and he stops on a dime. He looks right at me and then starts coming in. And I'm like, holy shit, he's coming right to me. And
that's like, man, that is so satisfying. I know I've already said this, but like, it's like boner worthy. I mean, like, when you can do that, it's like, I am in control of you from this point on. You know what I mean?
It is one of the absolute coolest things. Yes. Like, that is one of the very best moments as a hunter. When you hit that grunt and they spin, and that the moment is when you know it's happening. Like, oh, it worked. Here he comes.
Yeah. They stop and they just turn and they look back in your way, and you're like, gotcha, mother.
Oh, sorry. Here he comes. That's all right. We're very excited. And so, yeah, he comes in and basically is coming in on a rope, and then he starts to angle south again. And then I think in my head, oh crap, he's heading right towards my wind, and he's going right downwind. And now I'm thinking, oh geez, it's game over. And he stops, puts his nose up in the air, sniff, 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 keeps looking, sniff, 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 keeps looking. And like, this is the moment of truth. Like, it's gonna, either he's gonna bust out of here or it's gonna happen. I'm waiting, assuming any second now he's gonna kick up his white flag and tear out of there. And my scent control worked, and he puts his head back down and keeps coming right in. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes.
Beat him twice.
It's happening. And he walks straight in on, like, dead to me, head on to like 15 yards. But he's facing me at 15 yards. And he stops right in my shooting lane, and he's doing the head scan now. He's like, where's the buck? Where's the buck? He's looking, and I can't shoot. And now I'm thinking, oh no, like, what's going to happen here? But I'm ready. I'm locked in. I'm using my silverback back tension release for the first time. Not for the first time, but I'm going to get a shot for the first time, hopefully. And then he turns and starts to jog. And I have a tree. He's out of my shooting lane now. There's a tree with a bunch of like vines on it, grapevines or something. and there's one little hole in the vines. And so he's kind of starts to jog that direction, and he gets to that one hole, and I just, and he stops, and I pull back and let her rip and double lunged him. And you can just see him mule kick and run up the hill and run towards this fencer over there and crashes into the woods there. And you can just see all the trees like shaking, and then it stopped. Yeah. And then it was just,
I love that.
Yeah.
Like, that's the perfect thing. It's almost like the perfect hunt.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was, and what was unique about this, and I haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about the build up to this because I spent so much time talking about Tran. But there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes on this hunt that made that moment really special for me. Because, I hunted it in the early season, then we hunted again with Doug late October, and then we hunted it for this period during the rut. But then there'd also been all this time in the spring and summer that I've been trying to get this project off the ground, and then trying to get this property set up, and then trying to get people out here to see it and share their thoughts. But really there was this whole other side of things that we don't have to get into, but this is like a very different kind of project for me, right? I mean, kind of like filming my first TV show, and there's a lot of people involved and a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of doubts and questions and criticisms. And, for me, it was just like a very stressful summer and fall trying to make this thing work. A lot of late nights on the phone, rewriting things, changing things, trying to change plans, trying to make it work. And all of that, then I shoot this buck. And up to this point where I had taken this buck, I'm thinking, man, this thing is a bust. I mean, this is horrible. Everything's gone wrong. I'm a horrible host. No one's going to be interested in this. I can't even see a half decent buck. And then this thing happens in a split second. It all changes. And, the buck that I'd been hoping to see and that I talked about the most and that we thought we might have a chance to see, all of a sudden he's there and I get a shot and he's down. And all of these 10,000 things added to all the regular hunting excitement, all built up and then like overflowed out of me. And I had the most emotion-filled moment I think I've ever had as a hunter. I just kind of broke down. I've never had that happen before, but I just kind of was overwhelmed by everything, and I kind of just lost it for 5 minutes. And it was a really I don't even know what the right words are, but it was one of those moments that as a hunter, it's so much more than just like shooting a deer, Like that was the actual physical action that took place, but what it represented and what it culminated was so much more. And it's probably not fair to the deer to put all of that on that deer, all these other emotions, all these other things that were building up inside of me, but it all got put on this moment and led to a really just, I don't know, I was very, very thankful, really, really excited, very, very happy, just like you said. A whole lot of stuff came together there in that moment, and reminds you why you hunt, because you can have that kind of emotional experience out there in the woods, and like you said, get some great meat out of it, have some great memories. Got to share it with my dad because he showed up a couple days later and got to see the deer, and got to show my son the buck, and he got a thrill out of that. And the buck, I've because of the cold weather, I've just hung the buck up behind the barn, and so it's still hanging there, just letting it hang. And so every day my son wants to go out there and see the buck and touch it and just say buck, buck, buck over and over again. And that's what it's all about. So it was a really cool way to see a lot of work come to fruition.
That's awesome, dude. I'm glad you had that moment. And those moments, like, I don't like to like focus so hard on the cherry on top, which is the kill, I feel. But when you can have that moment that's so just feels so right, like me, I was just so overjoyed, and you got a little emotional, and I think that when you can stop putting, if you can relieve the pressure. Like for me, one thing I feel like I've learned how to do over the last several years, ever since I stopped filming my hunts, and not saying that I'm not ever going to do it again, but taking everybody out of the equation that's not you and that's not the animal, and taking out all the things that don't matter, then I think you can enjoy hunting that much more.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I'm constantly battling with, and I've gotten to a point where I handle it much better, but I still have those back and forth in my mind. I end up in the right place, but sometimes it takes me, some sitting there and like, but what about this? What about this? And then no, it's about you and your experience and this hunt, and that's all that matters. Yeah. So I'm getting there. I can't say I still don't have some stress in between, but yes, that is the way to enjoy this stuff the most, is to shut out all the outside noise and just hunt your hunt, enjoy it, enjoy the process. Don't be so. I have an interesting conundrum, because I always like to talk the big game to myself and externally, which is give it your all, put it all in the field, work, don't give up, be strong, push through the tough times. And that's what I'm always telling myself, because, that's what leads you to success. But then I also have this other side of me that's telling myself, you don't need to take it so seriously too. Like, remember to enjoy it. Remember to enjoy the process. Remember to have fun. Remember to, take some time off during the rut to sit with your dad and tell stories, because that means a whole lot more than sitting in a tree and trying to shoot a deer in the big scheme of things. So I think that family and balancing your drive with bigger things and priorities and all that is like what I take away from this hunting season. I don't know if I can wrap it up in like a succinct way, but I think over the course of the last 2 hours between your story and mine, I think that's kind of the moral of our story in general.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I love this. And every year I say it, I just love it so much. And I'm glad I have a wife who, I'm not going to say lets me go, because I feel like that's unfair to say, like someone is letting you do something, but works with me and, gives me the opportunity and the freedom, and is starting to understand a little more every year how this all comes together for me and the passion that's there. And I don't know, I just feel like when a person can focus on themselves and the animal and their scenarios, that there's a cloud that's lifted off and they just get so much more enjoyment out of it. Yeah. And like for me, I don't even think about anybody else. I want other hunters to be successful, but I'm going to celebrate what they've done regardless of how big the antlers are. I give zero about the antlers on deer. Like I just like when people measure their success on the antlers, you are losing. You are losing. You're losing. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I hear you there.
That's I'll start getting fired up if we keep talking about that. Dude, congrats on such an awesome season. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? It was a really cool hunt, and the season's not done for me. That's right.
I'm gonna keep at it. Still want to hopefully have a shot at Tran, but I will say that maybe what I got from this season so far is to control what you can control. There are certain things you can control, like your effort, like your priorities, like when you decide to shoot, when you don't to shoot, when you hunt, when you don't hunt, where you go. Control those things and do the best you can with that. But when it comes to what you can't control, recognize what you can't control and stop giving shits about it. Because if you can't control it, let it go. Whether that be what somebody else thinks about your decision, whether that be if someone else shoots your target buck, whether that be if the deer just aren't there in your farm and you're having really slow sits. If you can't control it, there's no point in stressing about it and worrying about it and letting it ruin your hunting experience.
Yeah. That's a fact, Jack. That is a fact.
And I think maybe with that, we should shut down this marathon Storytime podcast.
Yeah. That's a fact. I got to pee really bad.
Well, then get out of here. Go drain the tank, and we'll talk again soon. And that's gonna do it for us today. Just a couple quick reminders. If you haven't checked out my new book, That Wild Country, would highly recommend it and appreciate it if you'd be willing to pick up a copy. You can find it on Amazon from now through the beginning of December. And then from December 1st on, you'll be able to pick it up just about anywhere you can find books. A lot more to come on that soon. Otherwise, follow me on the Wired to Hunt Instagram account for more updates on recent trips, upcoming hunts, and all that good stuff. And otherwise, thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate your support. And until next time, good luck hunting and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.